set up its own YouTube account. So if they just search Janine Mattern, school board meeting recaps, they can see every board meeting. They are in 10-minute increments because not everyone can sit through a 2-hour meeting, nor do you want to. I do my best to segment them so you know what order, but they are all there, free of charge. And I did approach Mr. Hall to do this with a district camera for the district to be completely transparent so that it is on their website, not mine. All I would need is use of the camera, so I wanted to throw that out there too.
So that's a parent that's involved. Thank you.
Aaron, can you go back to the revenue slide, the increased revenues? The 740,000, now that is comparing 15, 16 versus 16, 17, or what is this? What's the comparison?
Correct.
740 over what? Over
Yeah,
what
no,
other
you're
year?
correct. 15, the two budget
Okay,
years, and then I provided this to kind of give you an idea of where we're trending.
sure. Well, just do the, when I do the quick math of that, I come up with about 1.2 to 1.3 million between those two areas. Could you just do some quick math for me?
Oh, yeah, no, you're right. And I think that's because I didn't include the 600,000 when I was saying the 740.
Okay.
I added the 640, or this 600,000
Right.
was always in the budget. I had that prior to making these adjustments, but I wanted that here to illustrate that we don't know with our state funding. So that would solve that. You're exactly right, and I forgot to make that point.
So it's 740 over the previous preliminary budget?
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure there wasn't, a cell issue or something taking place there.
Correct.
I guess my only thought from the board's perspective, having sat here for a few years, I would really encourage the board to actually consider going up to the Act 1 index, because, and I as a taxpayer see that as finishing rebuilding what we have started. We gave up tax increases earlier, and I know that's emotionally difficult and people are not happy about that, but I think the reality is we gave up those tax increases in the past. To go up to at least the index helps us to rebuild, so as a taxpayer I will say that. The only other thing I would say in terms of Montessori is, I guess it's that question, is a key part of our mission. And if it's not part of our mission long-term, and I think it is really hard to be a Montessori parent and to think, okay, we're going to be back here next year, year after that, year after that. And again, every board every year can make different decisions. But my thought is if it's not a key part of the mission, not that it's not a good education, but not part of what we're doing here with limited resources, just to throw it out, is another alternative to continue the program, not accept new students, at some point go from 2 classrooms to 1 classroom, and then over the course of maybe 5 years, close the program, but the kids who started in it would be able to finish in it. That's just another alternative of maybe a compromise, and just something for the board to consider if long-term the board does not see it as part of a key part of our mission.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I like the slide where you show the number of students impacted. I just want to point out that the impact to the students directly impacted has a different consequence. So I hope that's considered when you think about it. The impact to 2,000 students because they lose support staff, I think is different than the impact of 65 students that now completely change the way they're learning in school. So there's more to just this number. It's one way of looking at it, but I hope some of that's being considered. On a different topic, you presented a lot of good information last meeting on the student activities, particularly extracurricular activities and sports. If I look at all the numbers and try to estimate how many students are actually participating based on the activities fee line item, it works out to about 1,300. 1,300 if you factor in now that some kids are in multiple sports, boils down to closer to 1,000. If you are spending $1 million on 1,000 students, that's $1,000 per student. The student activity fee per sport is only $50. Have you considered getting any additional revenue increasing that participation fee or having it a per activity fee.
Yes.
I'll ask that first.
I brought
That's
that, I
some-
brought that up 2 years ago.
So $1,000 of your spend versus 50 that that particular student has to contribute seems like a huge delta and maybe not right. I'm glad you considered it and just wanted to bring that up. So people had some numbers to work with. And I just did an overall average. Every sport ranks differently. If you do by sport, you'll see some interesting things too. And I'd be happy to show what I did. There are a couple of sports that are over $2,000 per student, if I did the math right. In addition to the student activities, has there been any talk of increasing maybe the cost to go attend the event? Even if it's 50 cents this year and slowly increase that. Maybe you've already talked about it, but I think
We've
that's
actually
also
raised
something
it every
worth
year for the
considering.
last 3.
But you could get 50,000 or more in next year's budget for that.
You know what I hear about the gate fee? Don't my taxes pay for that?
Yeah, well, I think you'll
That's
see,
what I've heard.
but
I
I think
think-
you'll
have to pay
see,
$4 or $5 to go to a football game or a basketball game.
I think you'll see though, if the community supports the sport, they will pay to go.
Oh, I agree.
If they don't support the sport, that says something. That says something that maybe we need to reconsider that particular sport. So I think that those two options of increasing revenue, they might not sound like a ton of money, but at this point, 50,000
Well,
is significant.
That's a good point. It's not really a whole lot, but I felt the same way when I made a suggestion that the fees were changed on the sports and had a little adder to it. You did it over a couple of years and said this year there's an additional fee for football, and I don't want to pick on football, whatever, baseball, volleyball, but then just have a little additional fee and have it over a couple of years. It's not that's going to make that much of a difference in the budget. It's almost a feel-good thing, I guess, kind of, so.
Well, you're cutting everything, right? And you've got to make a decision, are you prioritizing education, or are you prioritizing extracurriculars? And when that 1,000 versus 7,100 or 7,200 students, it's only 15% of the students. So it's not that many that are participating in the sports. I didn't get a chance to look at the extracurriculars and break it down that way, and I don't think you gave me quite enough information to do a per student type cost, but I think it's worth looking at those two. In addition to electives and like how much are you spending on an elementary student? How much are you spending on a middle school student? How much are you spending on a high school student? It would be interesting to see the figures presented that way to see where maybe you want to dig a little deeper. I want to say just by guess, and I might be completely wrong, so I'd love for you to prove me wrong, but I would expect that the elementary student is not your significant amount of cost. I bet you spend well under $12,000 for an elementary student. And I think seeing it that way might help you decide where you might want to go and focus for anything, digging any deeper.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I just want to mention that between the years of 2012 and 13, 2013 and 14, 2015 and 16, all fees had been raised. I actually have the fee printout for those last 3 years, so they did raise those. I also want to mention, in case anyone wasn't at this particular meeting, but they tripled the parking fee last year. And that was held true. It was tripled. It wasn't a slight increase, it was tripled. So I unfortunately am here every meeting, so I have these little factoids in my mind. I think it's wonderful, the research that you're doing, but what you have to also remember when you're looking at how much is spent on an elementary student as compared to a middle school student, compared to a high school student, those elementary kids eventually do go into middle school and high school. So you need to keep good, solid teaching programs in place because they do eventually have to go forward, which is one of the things when my son's school closed, is I wanted to make sure that middle school philosophy was intact. And if it meant my son's school closing, then so be it.
I'd like to say something about Mr. Arnold brought up about what my metrics was. I don't have them because this isn't what I do every day. And I know that sounds maybe on the surface that that's a poor excuse, but if I had a business and I could, because I'm doing that for a living, I would have certain metrics that I could set up and I could make that determination. You go a lot by gut. And you're learning every week. We email each other, we call each other, we learn every week something that we didn't know before. And going back